Welcome to Sports Cards once again. Every sports card investor knows that a card from one of the greats that has a high demand and a low supply is a good card to consider. But there is one thing that has become increasingly important to keep in mind in the most recent years of sports card production, and that is artificial scarcity. What exactly is artificial scarcity? It's a common tactic in recent years by Panini and others to make a card seem like it has a low supply, when if you really consider it closely, it is not nearly as rare as it may seem to be at first. In this video, we'll take a closer look at this phenomenon and see how we can avoid getting caught in its web. A sports card company like Panini or Topps has one major goal: to make money. That's it. As much as I wish the goal of really contributing to the building of a wonderful hobby and collectors community was central to the mission of what they aim to do, it's pretty evident that money remains king in the land of sports card production. And it has pretty much always been this way. And this chase for whatever the trend may be that'll bring in the most quick cash has had some really negative effects on the hobby over the years. For example, in the 1990s, once the sports card producers realized how much fans loved the various inserts they were making, the industry went a little insert crazy. Looking through the inserts in the 1990s, while you can find a lot of gems, you can also find a lot of corny garbage that was very clearly a money grab, aimed to take advantage of the insert craze that had taken hold of the market. Years later, while some of the most iconic and unique of the bunch have remained valuable and highly sought, the vast majority of the insert cards from that era have fallen into the forgotten abyss to only really be sought by the occasional collector seeking a bit of nostalgia. But the sports card production companies don't care. They soaked up as much money as they could possibly get out of the insert mania until people just kinda got sick of it. Then for a long time, inserts just left the hobby, and even today, most inserts are actually less valuable than the base cards from the same set, other than a small handful of more iconic inserts that still do pop up here and there. Now, what has all of this to do with artificial scarcity? Well, back in the 1990s, these insert cards were the thing that people thought were unique and less common, and had that coolness factor that kept them in the minds of a lot of collectors. Nowadays, what is it that are that cool, highly sought thing that the sports card producers are really pushing as the cards to chase? Why, color parallels, of course. The color parallel craze of the last few years really resembles the insert craze of the mid-90s in many, many ways. Once again, the sports card producers have discovered an angle to pursue in which they can squeeze out a ton of money without much effort. I mean, be honest here, is there really anything lazier than a company printing the exact same card, but just adding an extra layer of color at the final stage of the printing process to make it seem unique and special and something to be chased? 99% of that card is just the exact same thing as the base card, with just an extra glittery sheen added to the top to make it seem unique. I'm sorry, but that just doesn't make something unique. But that by itself is not the entire story here. Artificial scarcity is more complex. When something like color parallels first began as a trend, it was like one single color parallel option. The 93-94 Topps Finest basketball cards were some of the very first premium cards that existed in the sports card world. The refractor parallels, which in many ways were the precursors to modern color parallels, were straightforward and just gave enough of something extra to the card to make them extra cool. With the emergence of the brand Topps Chrome a few years later, Topps basically did the same thing with an entire new brand, upgrading the Topps base card to a new, more sought level by adding a layer of extra cool. But at the same time, the parallels that existed were just these one variation things. As we begin to approach more recent times, you can see the card producers beginning to experiment with what would happen if they expanded the number of parallels. But when they first started doing this, it seemed to be in relative moderation. When the first Prism series was released in 2012-13, as well as the base cards, you could pull a green prism, a silver prism, or a very rare gold prism. Chasing a rainbow of all four variations was for the most part realistic. But as these color parallels began to gain in popularity over the next few years, Panini in particular decided to do exactly what had been done with inserts in the 1990s. Overproduce the hell out of them to try to squeeze out as much money as humanly possible. But this time around, they had to find a different way to do it. Collectors had learned from the junk wax era of cards that if a company just keeps producing and producing, they are just killing the value of those cards. And that just won't fly with collectors anymore. So instead, they decided to take advantage of serial numbering in order to still overproduce like crazy, but within a context where it feels like that overproduction is not happening. In the 2021 Prism series, there are no fewer than 44 different color parallels that exist for each base card. Now think about this for a second. When you pull a 2021 LaMelo Red Prism out of $2.99, that's pretty cool. I mean, yeah, that's pretty cool. I'd be happy if I pulled that card, but don't really think you've got yourself a super rare card there. It's cool, but you have to see it realistically. 299 is not a lot of cards. But if you consider that the red parallel is just one out of 44 potential parallels, then it starts to feel a little bit more and more like the scarcity of that card is an illusion. Sure, there may only be 299 of that exact red prism out there, but there are many thousands of parallel cards out there for that card. The company has just made one little adjustment in their production process to make that card feel extra rare compared to some of the others. This is an artificial kind of scarcity that they are manufacturing. Panini is printing up multiple thousands, junk wax style, of the base Prism Lamello, then adding one extra step to print up thousands more silver variations, then moving the silver layer out to replace it with a ruby wave layer, and printing up another couple of thousand, and with at least 15 of those color parallels being non-serial numbered, that right there might be a junk wax era kind of number of cards that have been printed of that Lamello rookie card. And then, as the top layer of it, now they start doing the serial numbered stuff. Change out the ruby wave layer and put in a red layer, but now also add in the serial number stamp and print out less of this particular variation. And then go down the list with the other 30 or so numbered color variations, each separately seeming to be quite a rare card. But when considered as a collective whole, these cards are being printed junk wax style with just enough of a difference to make it feel to many that it is rare. In the end, I don't know how many cards end up getting printed of this Lamello Prism rookie when it's in all its variations, but I do know that it is a number that is pretty much just ridiculous. Panini has convinced us that by changing the last layer of the production process with different colors, they are making different unique cards. But really, they're just manufacturing false scarcity that is pretty much just an illusion, and they are doing it in the most lazy way possible. Now, saying all of this, it doesn't mean that some of these more rare color variables are valueless. Value in sports card collecting is completely in control of the market, which is completely dependent on what people are actually buying. And for now, generally, people seem to love color parallels, or at least even if they don't love them, they are chasing them in a way where their actions are expressing love for this trend, even if underneath it all, they're actually annoyed by the ridiculous number of color parallels. But I don't think this is a recipe for a kind of card that holds long-term value. Eventually, this color parallel trend will have gained for Panini every last drop of profit they could possibly squeeze out of it, and it will go the way that inserts once did. Many cards that were highly sought in the 1990s don't have much value anymore. I think that'll happen to quite a number of color parallels in the coming decades. If the value of cards is determined by the market, at some point I just think a new trend will emerge, people will get sick of the color parallels and they'll start seeking for something else. And then all these color parallels will stop moving hands, and since I suggest that they really are not that unique or special looking, not really something that's going to be particularly interesting as something to collect long term, a lot of people may end up with piles and piles of cards that they don't really want and that nobody else really is willing to pay that much for. I think this is what is going to happen eventually with these cards that have been created through a process of artificial scarcity. Panini has become a master at making something feel rare when it is really one of hundreds of thousands. I mean, even with something as rare as a one of one, when one player has many dozens of one-of-one cards from just 1 year, and all of those one-of-one cards look almost identical to a common base card, it may officially be a one-of-one, but it is more like a 1 of 40 of the one-of-ones from just this year, and it looks just shades different than 45 other color variations from just this set, and pretty close to identical looking to the base card, which had tens of thousands of prints, maybe more. That may not sound nearly as sleek as one of one, but in many ways, it is a much more accurate description. I apologize for all the cynicism seeping into this particular video. I swear I'm not a cynical dude, but the artificial scarcity created by card producers these days just irks me the wrong way. Don't get me wrong, I still buy them sometimes, but only when I think I'm going to be able to flip it in the short term. I'm not holding on to any of these color variations long term, except for maybe a few of the lower end Dame Dollar ones, since his cards are the main centerpiece of my personal collection. But for now, that's all I have for you. Please do subscribe to this channel for lots of sports card related content.